And we're off. So welcome, Emily, and welcome everybody again. And we'll start.
Thanks. Sorry, I'm just quickly making a note of everybody that's here. Okay, I am going to start sharing my screen so I can do a presentation. If for some reason, I just want to apologize in advance. If for some reason I get an internet unstable, I might take my camera off so I don't lose my connection in the middle of the presentation. Okay. Welcome everybody to the Affordable Housing Town Hall number 2. A quick little introduction about myself. I'm a senior associate at Clark Payton Hints. I'm a licensed professional planner since 2009. I actually moved to Lambertville in 2005, bought my house in town in 2012. Since moving to town, I've served on three of the city's commissions: the Shade Tree Commission from 2006 to 2018, where I was the chair for about 6 or 7 years of that commission, the Environmental Commission from 2008 to 2012, and then I was the Environmental Commission representative on the Planning Board from 2009 to 2012.
I'm getting married.
Before
From those.
We may have a problem here. Hang on a second. Looks like there might be somebody I need to throw out.
I just turned off their video,
Okay, I think I just
removed them.
removed somebody from
Okay.
the meeting.
Okay. And I was appointed the city planner in 2013. And then subsequently, I've been working with about 12 different municipalities on affordable housing efforts and have assisted various court-appointed special masters in my office on affordable housing matters in 18 different municipalities over 8 counties. So the purpose of tonight's meeting, so last week we really talked about the background and the history of affordable housing in New Jersey, going through the court cases and Lambertville's settlement agreement and all the steps that it took really from December 7th, sorry. I also was at that very late night planning board meeting, so I apologize as well. From July 2015 through this past December, all of the city's efforts kind of get to where we are. So tonight we're gonna, I'm gonna start off again with the key facts that we ended with the meeting last week, a brief summary again of the city's third round obligation, what our 2020 amended settlement agreement compliance mechanisms were, some of the discussion of the required formulas that each municipality is required to meet when they're creating their plan on how they will meet their obligation, brief descriptions about the various compliance mechanisms that are available to municipalities to use. And then we're going to have some, depending on the total number of attendees, we're either going to have a larger discussion for really getting feedback from you guys, the public, or have smaller breakout sessions. And then if we have the breakout sessions, we'll all come back together to kind of discuss what each of the little individual groups talked about and then discuss next steps. So the key facts are, since 2015, the city's created only 2 affordable units. That's 1 Habitat for Humanity home and 1 accessory apartment. Since the 2015 settlement agreement, sorry, that should be 2018 settlement agreement, had to be amended to replace the overlay zone on the Clausen site with another way to allow for the creation of affordable units. And we also, at the same time, when the city was negotiating an amendment to that 2015 settlement agreement, decided to remove the condemnation aspect of the Academy Hills site, which that had some time limits in our initial court order approving the original 2018 settlement agreement. So those required timeframes got transferred over to the new police station site redevelopment that was included as part of the 2020 amended settlement agreement. Because the city didn't actually move forward with executing a redevelopment agreement for the police station site, it's currently out of compliance with that 2020 amended settlement agreement. So now the city needs to amend the settlement agreement again to try to stay in compliance, or get back into compliance, I should say. So what the city's third round obligation, a little background, every municipality's obligations broken into 3 areas. There's the present need or rehabilitation obligation, the prior round obligation, and then what's known as the third round obligation. So the city's, sorry, I want to just turn my video off before I lose everybody. So the city's present need rehabilitation obligation was 1 unit. We've actually completed 3 since 2015, so we have satisfied that obligation. The city's never had its prior round obligation is 0. It's never had a new construction obligation before. So this is the first time in the 3 rounds of affordable housing that the city's actually had a new construction obligation. So as part of the 2018 settlement agreement, the city negotiated down what their third round obligation is to 137 units. And that is actually split between 2 parts. Because we did a vacant land analysis, which I know I discussed at the last meeting, that process, but because we did a vacant land analysis, the city, their third round plan is, our obligation is split into what's called a realistic development potential, and that's 88 units. And these are the units that are intended to be built by July 1st, 2025, which is when the third round ends. Of these units, the city's already provided 38 units. It needs to provide a total of 50 more units or credits to meet that 88 unit obligation. So that the 50 more units or credits, that includes a breakdown of 28 actual units and 22 bonus credits. So we can get bonus credits, which I can talk about in a little more detail later on. But for rental units, you can get a bonus credit. So what we want to do is actually create 28 rental units so we can maximize and get those 22 bonus credits. The second part of our third round obligation is what's called unmet need. So that's where the city has to try to provide these units, and that's called creating a realistic opportunity for the creation of these units. So the city's unmet need is 49 units. So that's, the 88 plus 49 equals 137. So of those 49 unmet need units, the city actually has 29 actual units created already. So in reality, it's again, the city needs to create a realistic opportunity for the creation of 28 units. So somehow it just wound up that in both instances, in the RDP and unmet need, we need to create 28 units. So they're 2 separate 28 units. So just try to keep that in mind as we move forward here. The obligation negotiated with Fair Share Housing Centers and spelled out in the settlement agreement that's signed by the city and then approved by the courts. And then the settlement agreement specified those tools, what we refer to as compliance mechanisms the city has agreed to use to meet its obligation. So again, the RDP is 88 units. These units are supposed to be constructed by July 1st of 2025. The city's created 38 of the units towards that 88 obligation. The city is entitled to receive 22 rental bonus credits to meet its obligation. So we really need to construct 28 family rental units to fully satisfy that RDP obligation. In terms of the unmet need, that number's 49. We have to provide a realistic opportunity for units to be constructed. The city's done that through adopting these inclusionary overlay zones, the mandatory set aside ordinance, as well as the existing accessory apartment conditional use ordinance in the R2 zone. So the city has 21 actual units constructed towards that 49 unit obligation, unmet need obligation. So again, it's creating that realistic opportunity for 28 more units. Here's a brief, a snapshot of the table of how the city is addressed or indicated it was going to meet its RDP obligation in that 2020 amended settlement agreement. So you'll see we have 11 of the 18 bedrooms out of the Little Haven group home. There's 4 Habitat for Humanity units, 22 of the 37 age-restricted rental units at Heritage Village, an accessory apartment. Those are all constructed actual units. That's where those 38 units come from that have been constructed. The other thing that we have identified to meet the RDP is from the Lambertville High School site. So this is a site where the city adopted a redevelopment plan that provides for a inclusionary development, which I will discuss in more detail a little on as well. That would result in 139 total units with a 20% set aside, resulting in those 28 affordable units. Because we did this through a redevelopment plan, we're able to specify the tenure of those units. So that's whether it's a rental or a for sale unit. In regular zoning, you can't specify if a unit can be rental or for sale. So that's one of the benefits of the redevelopment when it comes to affordable housing projects. But these are specified as needing to be 28 affordable rental units. So then the city could get those 22 bonus credits. Similarly, here's the table that shows how the city intended to provide that realistic opportunity to meet its unmet need obligation. So this shows that the city has adopted its affordable housing development fee ordinance and a spending plan. So the court gives the city credit for that towards meeting its obligation, unmet need obligation. The remaining 7 bedrooms out of the 18 in the Little Haven group home, 12 of the 37 Heritage Village units, and there's still 3 more that we can use to a future round. And again, I can discuss that in a little more detail later on. There's the apartment that's underneath the library that counts towards this, as well as the inclusionary overlay zones that the city's already adopted at the Bird Farmstead, the Corboy lot, and the Trenton Cracker Factory. The city also, they went through the motions and adopted the redevelopment plan for the police site. However, because the city did not execute that redevelopment agreement in December, this might be one of the things that we'll need to look at about removing from the amended settlement agreement and replacing. The city also proposed a 5-unit accessory apartment program. One of them has been created so far. And again, the city's mandatory set aside ordinance, which it just elected to expand back in December to in an effort to be able to capture more units in the downtown portion of the city. So there's certain formulas that municipalities need to meet when they're creating or identifying how they will comply with their obligations. So because we're a vacant land town, our formulas are a little different. So our formulas are really to determine the minimum number of rental units we need to provide. It's 25% times the realistic development potential. And if it comes to an uneven number, like for example, 10.2, you round up. Of those rental units, a minimum of the total rental units of the obligation need to be 50% of those have to be family rental units. So that means that they can't be age restricted and they can't be part of those supportive special needs housing. There's also a formula to determine the maximum number of age restricted units any town can use to meet its obligation. So again, this would be 25% of the realistic development potential. But in this instance, if it's an odd number like 10.2, you round down. So the maximum would be 10 versus 11. And then in terms of the maximum bonus credits that a town can receive, it would be 25% of that realistic development potential. And again, you can round up. So what I've done on the right portion of the screen is actually done the math based on the city's RDP of 88. So you can see that the minimum number of rental units the city has to provide is 22 rental units. of those 22, 11 have to be family rental units, which means they cannot be age restricted or the supportive special needs units. The city's allowed a maximum of 22 age restricted units as well, which if you can recall, we've capped that at the Heritage Village units. And then they're entitled to up to 22 bonus credits. So again, you know, how is the city doing with meeting those RDP formula obligations? So again, the minimum number of rental units the city has to provide are 22 rental units. We've already provided 34 rental units, so that obligation is satisfied. Of those rental units, 11 have to be family rental units. So far, the city's only provided one family rental unit. So that's really where the city is lacking, is providing those family rental units. The maximum number of age restricted units is 22. We're claiming all 22 of those credits or age restricted units from the Heritage Village site. And then we're entitled to a maximum of 22 bonus credits. And to date, based on the projects that we have going towards our RDP, we've not claimed any of those bonus credits. So again, it's really those family rentals that will help us get those bonus credits, or what the city needs in the immediate short term. So getting into the compliance mechanisms, and let me see if I can turn my camera back on without losing
Emily, it's
everybody.
Julia. Before you go on, is it just on the last slide, then is it correct for people to think about this as we go into conversations later in the evening, that for the RDP, what we're really looking at right now is a way to find 10 rental units?
No, well, in terms of just meeting that obligation, yes, 10 rental units, but remember, we need 28 more actual physical units to meet the full 88 unit obligation.
Okay, so we need at least 10 family rental units and then 18 other units.
Yeah, but you know, also in order to maximize those bonus credits, and maybe I'll talk about those a little bit. So bonus credits, we're allowed a maximum of 22 bonus credits. So those are always from rental units. So a family rental unit, that one unit equals one bonus credit. For supportive special needs bedroom, those units are viewed by the bedroom and not the full unit. One bedroom of supportive special needs get you one bonus credit. For age restricted rental units, one of those only gets you 1/3 of a bonus credit. So the priority in terms of being able to to maximize the number of credits, bonuses you can receive, you always want to start with your family rentals, then your supportive special needs, and then age restricted units. So in order to maximize and be able to obtain all 22 of those bonus credits, so it's less units we actually physically have to construct, you want to create at least 22 of those family rental units out of the remaining 28 units that we need to provide.
Emily, would you do us a favor and just define what a family rental unit is for people who may not?
Sure. So a family rental unit, when I talk about family units, that's any unit that is not an age restricted or senior unit. So it's not restricted to people that are those that are 55 and older, and it's not a supportive special needs unit. So that is units that are, and again, I'll discuss that in more detail, but those are residences that are licensed by the New Jersey Department of Health, and those, you know, sometimes they're referred to as group homes, but they're for developmentally disabled or physically disabled, things like that. So they're special, like, supportive housing.
So a family rental unit. I'm sorry to interrupt. A family rental unit is not does not specify a size, a bedroom count, or anything like that.
Correct. And it's more about the type, you know, the type of household that occupies it. So even if a unit is considered a family unit, it doesn't mean that you know, if somebody 55 and older can't live there, it's just not restricted to those that are 55 and older.
And there are, just for everybody's knowledge, in case you happen to have heard this and you wonder why we're saying, oh, we're not worrying about bedrooms, there are a whole other set of regulations when you get to the development by development perspective. Like as you're working with a developer, there are rules about how many of a certain kind, certain size of home you have to create. We purposely chose not to get into that tonight because it's just a little too in the weeds, and it really is project by project. And I'm sure that you're all with me then realizing that this is quite enough. This level is quite enough as it is. Thanks, Emily. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. So here's, you know, just the list of the compliance mechanisms that are available. And I have a slide for each of them for more detailed discussions, but there's new construction, which could be either inclusionary development or 100% affordable housing development. There's supportive special needs housing. There's the accessory apartment program. There's something called a market to affordable program, assisted living facilities, as well as extensions of expiring controls. So in general, for new construction projects, there's income and bedroom distribution requirements. So for income distribution, any new construction project, there's basically a 50-50 split between low and moderate income units. And if there's an uneven number, it always goes in the favor of the low income. The low income 50% is actually further split. So 13% of all of the affordable housing units for a project should have to be very affordable to very low income units. And that's 30% of the median income. Then 37% would be affordable to low income. And then the remaining 50 would be affordable to moderate income. For family units, there's also, as Julia was just referring to, a bedroom distribution requirement. So for a development, no more than 20% of the affordable units are allowed to be studio or one bedroom units. At least 30% of the affordable units have to be two bedroom units, and at least 20% of the affordable units have to be 3-bedroom units. So for the remaining number of affordable units, they can be either 2 or bedroom, but you have to meet those minimum or maximum bedroom requirements. For age restricted units, all of the units can be 1-bedroom units, or for each 2-bedroom unit, there has to be an efficiency unit. So it's almost like a 1-for-1 of if you're going to include 2-bedroom units. Okay, so inclusionary zoning. This is when there's a development, and I know we talked about this. Some of you might be familiar with this. This is what the concept for the police station site was, but this is a development that contains both low and moderate income housing units mixed within the market rate unit. So the affordable housing set-asides are typically 15% if all of the units are rental units, or the market rate units are rental units, and 20% if the market rate units are for sale units. So again, in the city, in the 2020 amended settlement agreement, both the Lambertville High School site as well as the police station site were fit into this inclusionary zoning category. Inclusionary developments may also be part of a mixed use development. So if we were going to redevelop a shopping center, or, you know, add stories to an existing shopping center, so it's retail on the ground floor, residential use on top, you can have a mix of the affordable and market rate apartments on those upper stories. Development of the residential portion of the inclusionary zoning has to comply with those income and bedroom distributions I just covered, as well as additional phasing requirements. So you can't, you're only allowed to build a certain number of the market rate units before you have to start building the affordable units, to make sure that the affordable units actually get constructed, as well as the affordable units in an inclusionary zoning project are required to have a deed restriction for at least 30 years. So 100% affordable housing projects, these are a little different, where every single unit in this new construction project would be affordable to a low and moderate income household. So these types of project, there's often financing that includes funds from a municipal's affordable housing trust fund, or if there isn't sufficient money in the housing trust fund, the municipality would have to bond to help subsidize the creation of that project. 100% affordable housing projects also need to comply with those income and bedroom distribution requirements and need to be deed restricted for at least 30 years. In some instances, when there's 100% affordable housing projects that receive low-income housing tax credits, they actually are deed restricted for 45 years, but that's not in every instance. Examples of 100% affordable housing projects that currently exist in town are the Habitat for Humanity homes, Heritage Village, Hibernia Apartments, and South Hunterdon Apartments. I know a number of people have brought up the idea of community land trust in town as well. So this would be that category where those community land trusts would fall, if the city were to think about that in the future. Supportive and special needs houses, as I was alluding to a little earlier. So these are structures in which households live in distinct bedrooms, but share a kitchen, plumbing facilities, central heat, and common areas. Generally, these occur where a organization such as Allies or Mercer Arc or Serve, they'll purchase an existing single family home and convert it into supportive special needs housing. These units may be restricted to special needs groups, such as those with developmentally disabilities or mental illness, veterans and their families, homeless households, or victims of domestic violence. The residents are referred by a state agency or licensed private service provider, and units are not marketed to the general public. Affordable housing credit is by the bedroom as long as the occupants of the facility are not related. And these also require at least a 30-year deed restriction. Accessory apartments. So these are self-contained residential dwelling units with a kitchen, sanitary facilities, sleeping quarters, and a separate entrance, which is created either within an existing home or through the conversion of an existing accessory structure on the same site or by an addition to an existing home or accessory building. So in Lambertville right now, accessory apartments are permitted as a conditional use within the R2 downtown residential zoning district only. Accessory apartments are deed restricted for at least 10 years. So that means that once those 10-year deed restriction is up, that unit could turn into a market rate unit. For the city's accessory apartment program that we currently have, the city must provide a subsidy of $20,000 to create each moderate income accessory apartment and $25,000 to create each low income accessory apartment. And for the 5-unit accessory apartment program we have in the current 2020 amended settlement agreement, the city is able to cover the cost of that program through its affordable housing trust fund.
Sorry, one question. If a homeowner wanted to create an accessory apartment on their own for whatever reason, just said the city must provide. So is there some rule that says if somebody isn't asking for us a subsidy, we must provide one?
The Council on Affordable Housing Rules says that the subsidy has to be provided, but I'm sure, if somebody's willing to create it through their own generosity and deed restricted for 10 years without a subsidy, I don't see why we couldn't do that. But it's really to help offset the cost of, generally there's construction costs and approval process cost, and then for the reduced rent that you collect over that 10-year period. So it's try to help offset those costs to entice people to create the accessory apartment, that deed restricted unit, for at least 10 years.
Thank you.
The accessory apartment units are affirmatively marketed by the municipality's administrative agents, and then the potential tenants are income qualified or qualified by that administrative agent and then referred to the owner. So the owner then will be able to approve the tenant that goes into that accessory apartment and collect the regulated rent. So Somebody can't just construct one of these accessory apartments for their brother to move into or their friend to move into. There is a process for how that the tenants are identified. And then, let's see, and a little background on affirmatively marketing. So that is, Lambertville is in Region 3 in the state. So it's where Hunterdon County is with Somerset and Middlesex County. So when we say we affirmatively market a project, there is basically a notice of available units that go to various agencies and government location, municipal like buildings and whatnot in all 3 of those counties. The market to affordable program. So this is where an existing market rate unit is converted to a deed restricted lower moderate income unit through a, sorry, I need to shift, through a subsidy to the owner. The municipality, again, this is one of those rules where the Council on Affordable Housing in their rules indicate a minimum subsidy that needs to be provided. So a municipality is required to provide a minimum subsidy of $25,000 to convert a market rate unit into a moderate income unit and $30,000 to convert a market rate unit into a low income unit. Additional subsidies may be necessary depending on market prices and rents in the area. Most in this general area, most likely would be higher than those minimum subsidies. The unit may then be sold to an income qualified buyer at a regular price or rented by the existing owner to an income qualified tenant at a regulated, not regular price, regulated price, which are those affordable housing for sale or rental prices. The market to affordable units have to be deed restricted for at least 30 years. Assisted living facilities. So these are facilities licensed by the New Jersey Department of Health and Senior Services to provide apartment style housing and congregate dining and to assure that assisted living services are available when needed. These units are considered age restricted housing. So consistent with assisted living license requirements, 10% of the units within an assisted living facility must always be available to Medicaid eligible residents. And kind of by de facto, those Medicaid eligible residents qualify for affordable housing. So for every assisted living facility that's constructed, a town can take credit for 10% of the units within that facility. And then lastly, the last compliance mechanism that's available is what's called extensions of expiring controls. So this is for projects where the deed restrictions will expire during the current round and are eligible for another credit in a subsequent round if those controls are extended for another 30 years. So this may require, depending on how the deed restrictions were initially created, it may require a monetary subsidy. It may not. More often than not, we're finding that they do. And so what I've done here is actually listed some of the Lambertville's existing affordable housing units when their deed restrictions are set to expire. So we have an accessory apartment that will expire in 2031. One of the Habitat units in 2032. The Heritage Village units will expire in 2035. And then 2 other Habitat units will expire in 2042, 2045. So this is a way that the city would be able to still get credit for units without, again, construction of new units. You know, with the city that is almost fully built out, this may be a good compliance mechanism to think about for future rounds. So I know that was a lot. And now it's really, we want to hear from you guys. So Julie, do we have enough people that we're going to actually split into the breakout rooms?
Yes, we do. We have 42 people.
Okay.
So I am going to just take 1 second and
wait, before you do that,
yes.
So we are going to split out into our breakout rooms. Mayor Nowick, Council President Taylor, and I have Elaine Clisham here, as well as myself, will be moderators of I will break out to 4 different rooms, and we'll each be a moderator of one of them. I just wanted to say Elaine, she's a Lambertville resident, but she also works with me at Clark Peyton Hinds. So that's why I've asked her to assist us tonight and help moderate one of these breakout sessions.
And Emily, do we have some sense of how long we should be in the breakout room? Do you want to give us a time to kind of work through our conversations and then rejoin?
Sure, it's just shy of 7:40 now. I think this whole meeting goes until 8:30, so maybe so we have enough time to come back and have group discussion about what the different areas have talked about. Should we say like come back at 8:08 or 8:05?
I think let's set up for 15 minutes. This is a lot of information that's pretty new for a lot of people. So let's see how we get with 15 minutes. And if we need more, we'll have other options to talk.
Okay.
I am just trying to make sure that we've got people.
I'm going to stop sharing for the time being, because I don't think I need to share during the actual breakout sessions.
Yes, so give me 1 second, everybody, while I get these rooms set up. Not everyone is showing up in here. So how do I get people in the right rooms? Well, we're gonna figure it out. We'll see what happens. Okay, so Andrew, how do I get you and I into a room?
We do a manual. Let's see here.
It won't let me. Like we're not showing up as options.
We should.
Yeah, we're not because we're.
I don't know how to do.
I guess
that.
because we're. Oh, you know what?
No, if I can assign you to a room.
I'm gonna go to room 2. You go to room 1.
So I'm assigning you to room 2.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I get to room 1. Let's see.
Yeah, I can't see a way to get you there.
Elaine's in room 1. You need to join room 2. It looks like I don't know how to get to. I don't know how to get to myself here. Let me see if I can figure it out. Are you still? Oops. Let's see. Hello, Andre. We're just doing breakout rooms, so hang on just a second. I'm going to put you in a room here. Let's see how to do this. Breakout rooms. Unassigned. Get into a breakout room. Hello there. Hang on just I'm trying to figure out how to put you into a breakout room. Let's see here. Breakout rooms. Let's see who is unassigned. Assigned to room 1. Admit. Assigned.
I wonder where everybody else is.
Hopefully solving all our problems.
Oh, here they come. Okay. I was worried for a second that I did something wrong.
Okay,
It always happens
so.
cut off mid-sentence.
That was so short.
Yeah. So I actually just had a very good question in our breakout session. So before I want to kind of hear feedback from all the various groups, I just want to restate what this question was because it might help everybody in the rest of the discussion. So the question was, what exactly do we need to do to meet our obligation by July 1st, 2025 in terms of our RDP and the unmet need? So to meet our obligation, it's right now for our RDP, we're missing those 20, essentially 28 units. 22 of those, we should really strive to make those family rental units so we can get those 22 bonus credits. We can also do it where it's, we do at least 10 of those are family rentals and we do some, 10 to 12 supportive special needs bedrooms to, again, the goal is to maximize those 22 bonus credits. So whether it's a mix of family rentals and a mix of supportive special needs housing, that's really the goal here, to meet that RDP obligation. In terms of the unmet need, it's really just providing an opportunity, so zoning or programs in place that people can, if they elected to, utilize to create units. So right now, where because we didn't move forward with the police project, there's kind of a gap for those 5 units and creating a realistic opportunity for the construction of units. One of the things I think we can possibly do as part of a future negotiation is discuss how we already elected to expand where the mandatory set aside ordinance reaches. Other possibilities is maybe we expand what zones the accessory apartments are permitted in. So there's other options available to the city to create those realistic opportunities to satisfy that unmet need portion. So.
Mayor Noack, we have a hand up. I'm not sure if we're taking general questions yet, or do we want to run through the breakouts first?
Andre, if you don't mind, we'll just run through the breakouts. We see you there. So if you just hold tight for a minute, we'd appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you. Julia, do you want to go? Well, why don't we, Emily, do you want to go first? And then we'll go Julia, Elaine, and then I'll bring up the last.
Yeah, so in group 4, we discussed, we didn't actually get through all of the questions. We had more just general dialogue and question and answers, but I think the idea of inclusionary zoning and 100% affordable were both discussed, and I think the group, the idea of inclusionary, it's appealing and it's not, it's appealing because it's a least cost effort for the city, but it means there's more overall units that are constructed. 100% affordable. I think there's interest in that, also with the community land trusts, which are kind of tied to that 100% affordable project. We did discuss those, or where that's a model that the city should maybe look into for future long-term, mid to long-term solutions. We also talked about the possibility of putting any affordable housing units on the Clausen site, and the village apartments, making sure that whatever happens there, that we have affordable housing units there. I can't get to my notes since I'm sharing my screen already. I think I covered everything that we had discussed, though.
Emily, I'm sorry, did you just say something about the Clausen site at the end there?
Yeah, somebody had asked a question if we could put the units there. My response actually was, it's something the city is more interested in doing, kind of like a full, like almost a mini master plan just of the Clausen site to see what the potential uses would be for all of those buildings before they would commit to any one particular use. So it's a possibility, but it's not 100% done deal. You know, it's on the table, but we don't know what any of the
It's
buildings are
definitely
gonna
not
be.
definitely not a done deal.
Yeah,
I don't even
definitely
wanna
not
put
a done deal.
in the realm of possibility.
We don't know what any of the buildings are going to be used for at this point. So I think the city wants to do some more visioning and discussions on that before they would commit to any affordable units on that site.
Okay, thanks for the update.
Emily, I think we also want to, consider some of the constraints or criteria for putting affordable housing in that location. Given, my understanding is the affordable housing, fair share housing discourages, properties being developed solely for affordable housing. They prefer more of a mixed income approach. And, we'd have to think about how viable it is to fund that. Either the city would have to undertake that solely, or we'd have to try to find a developer that would find the project viable enough for them to undertake. Is that correct?
Yeah, with the with 100% affordable projects, generally what you see is that they tend to be larger multifamily projects, 60 to 80 to 100 unit projects, because that's how the subsidy per unit is, it reduces the subsidy per unit when those developers go for low income housing tax credits. I believe there's a fairly new program that was just announced this year that makes it easier for, smaller 100% affordable projects, like 20 unit, 30 unit projects, to get some sort of subsidies, or not necessarily tax credits, but some other sort of subsidy. I will be quite honest, I'm not 100% familiar with it. I need to familiarize myself with it a little more. It's fairly new.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Emily, I'm going to suggest that we go through all the rooms first,
Yep.
just so we can get a good. Council President Taylor, do you want to talk a little bit about your room, please?
Sure. I did not use the prompts because I'm bad at following rules, but we talked generally about a couple interesting things came up. There were some questions about the market to affordable, how that would work, what it would really cost to do it here, like what subsidy would be required to make it attractive. And questions about how the city, well, one, I specified, and we should just make very clear, that is a mechanism available to us. The city doesn't currently have a program. It's something we are considering, and that's part of why we're raising it here. So it's nothing we can offer today, but if we had it, how would the city market it? How do we talk to people when they're coming in for permitting to make sure they're aware of these issues? I thought that was an interesting question for us. How do we sort of link things a little bit better to make sure we're sharing information? A few questions about Village Apartments and what's happening there. So I gave the update that I can give. One suggestion, could we do, and I don't know the answer to this, is there a way to do some sort of local percentage of a real estate transfer tax that would then go into our local affordable housing trust fund? I don't know enough about that, but there's just questions of how do we start to get creative about financing mechanisms?
That's a good question. That I'm not sure about. I don't know of any town doing that. I mean, right now municipalities adopt their development fee ordinance. So unfortunately, affordable housing is truly funded through new construction. It's kind of a failed system where, how we have an open space tax to fund open space for all, we unfortunately don't have a similar financing mechanism for affordable housing. So for those developments or projects that occur that don't actually create affordable units, they have to pay a development fee. So that is, how things are funded, or through bonding if municipalities don't have enough money in their trust funds.
Yep. question about the accessory dwelling units and are we considering it? My response was that I personally think it's something we should consider, and that speaking only very slightly for my colleagues on council, that I thought we would be open as a body to considering it, but I personally am very open to looking at it. And then I think the last big point was just making sure, which I said is true to a degree, at least to the degree that I can share anything about it right now, is that, are we talking to existing owners of buildings who have sizable portfolios? And the answer to that is yes, and we'll pursue that as much as we can to see what kind of relationships we can build.
Yeah, and to answer the one question you had about market to affordable, who determines what that subsidy is the city, their administrative agent, who's Triad Inc. They would create a market to affordable program manual, and in that manual, they would identify and determine what the minimum subsidies would be for moderate and low income units. And the city could do just a rental market to affordable, or they could do a rental and a for sale market to affordable. The rental program would be less expensive than a for sale program. So.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Elaine?
So, hi, everybody, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to do this. Y'all had much chattier groups than we had. But I will say that we did spend a little bit of time talking about inclusionary zoning. Two specific questions came up that I will put out here, and if we don't know the answer today, maybe we can get them. One is in terms of the mandatory set aside, the question is the Valparaiso building included? There's some confusion as to whether that is the correct side of Route 29.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Good, because apparently that's been for sale. I don't know, somebody said that, but if there's an opportunity there, the feeling was we want to capture it. And the other question was about the CVS. There is a rumor that CVS will be closing some stores. So are we in conversation with them about whether that property will become available?
I don't think we are currently in conversations with them. I know we've had conversations with them in the past, trying to work something out to redevelop that site. And at the time, those landowners were not interested and kind of terminated those discussions at the time. But, if CVS, if that's one of the CVS stores to close, I think that conversation we could jumpstart those conversations.
The other two things we talked about when we started talking about 100% affordable housing, the sentiment was that the preference is for affordable housing to be integrated throughout the city to the greatest degree possible and not concentrated. And then when we got talking about special needs units, there was some enthusiasm for that just because there is a need for those and they too can be integrated throughout the city. Beyond that, we didn't really spend a lot of time talking the pros and cons of any of the other mechanisms.
Yeah, and with the support of special needs, those also, almost every program except inclusionary zoning requires some sort of subsidy. But those, it's, I've seen it range anywhere from, 30,000 to, and supportive special needs units predominantly are all very low income units. Occasionally it's a split of very low and low, but more often than not, they're all very low income. So the subsidy, it might sound a little high, but it's, I've seen it anywhere where it's, 30,000 per bedroom or sorry, 30,000 per bedroom to, 50,000 per bedroom or 70,000 per bedroom. So it depends the municipality, where it is, the price of the existing home, how much effort it is to convert it into a supportive special needs housing.
But yeah, there was support for having some of those in the city.
Yeah. Great.
There was also support for having an assisted living facility, but people understand that that's not going to help us short term.
Right. Yeah, that might be a good long term.
Yeah, we're all getting older.
Yeah.
Speak for yourself, Elaine.
Yeah. Well, I'm better than the alternative, Mayor.
That's true.
Okay. I think that was really all great feedback.
So,
Mayor Network,
Michael.
you didn't do yours yet?
I
Yeah,
did.
sorry.
That's right. I haven't. Yeah, I'm sorry. I had a little technical trouble getting into my room. I was trying to jump into it, so I was a little bit late. But we had in the time we spent talking, we had a great conversation. One of the questions that came up, and I know that Council President Taylor and Emily, I think to some degree you already have some level of knowledge about this, is the question of abandoned properties in town, and kind of, do we have an inventory, and kind of what the as I referred to, the slow moving mechanisms are for potentially incorporating those into an affordable housing if it's possible. So I don't know if either one of you can speak to that. And then there was one other thing that was raised in our group.
We have not made our list yet. There aren't many, so it won't take long to do that list. And once there's a process we have to go through that actually isn't as far as government processes go, the process to get hold of an abandoned property isn't that terribly long. And then we would have a choice if the city wanted to take action. So just to remind everybody, with the Abandoned Properties Rehabilitation Act, which is a state enabling legislation, and we passed a local ordinance in the fall so that we could take advantage of that. If a building is deemed abandoned using statutory criteria, that then gives us special powers to do something about it. And one of those options is spotlight eminent domain, meaning we could take that one building and it doesn't have to go through a redevelopment process in order to get a hold of it. So it's a different kind of eminent domain. We are not obligated to do anything. So just so everyone knows, if we make that list could sit there forever and we never act on it. Or we could, if there are buildings that would be to our strategic advantage. So that is definitely something that we should be looking at and seeing what's going on with any abandoned buildings and if they could help us on this front.
Yeah, so I guess taking that
President?
one step further is if the city does acquire some of these abandoned buildings, then it could either, depending on the type of building or the configuration or whatnot, it could either become a market to affordable for sale unit, or if the city wanted to rent it, if it rented instead, it can go into that program, or again, the supportive special needs housing, where they acquire it and they could basically donate the building to a supportive special needs provider to convert into a group home.
How are those abandoned buildings identified? How does the city learn of them? Or
Sean, we're gonna just get through this and then we'll come back to
Okay,
questions. Sorry.
And so the second, the second point that was talked about a little bit was Habitat for Humanity. There's some interest in Habitat for Humanity, and we talked about that. And that led into a conversation about the potential for working with other agencies that do help facilitate nonprofits or whatever projects, that will help facilitate projects. Excuse me. And there's some interest in exploring, the possibility of working with agencies like Habitat, but maybe not necessarily Habitat, because we know that we require vacant land, and it's an ownership model, and so forth. So that was the other thing that we talked a little bit about in our group, and I think that basically covers it. One thing I would like to do, if you guys don't mind, is maybe write down these questions from each of our groups, and we'll do we'll just answer them sort of formally, and we'll put that document on the website, or release it out to the public, just so that we can have just so we can have these questions kind of formally answered in a way that people would find helpful. And unless anybody else has any last remarks about groups, let's open it up to questions. And I will say that I'm happy to stay on for an extra 15 or 20 minutes if people want to have conversation kind of beyond 8:30. I'm happy to just kind of keep an informal conversation going for a little while if people feel as though they still have questions or want to make points kind of beyond the time limit here. So I won't expect anybody else to do that in terms of moderators, but I'm happy to do it. So we'll start off with PAS iPad Pro. If you want to.
Do you want me to stop sharing my screen so we can see everybody?
Yeah, that would
easier?
be great. Thanks,
Okay.
Emily. So PAS iPad Pro, would you just identify yourself and then go ahead and ask your question or make your comment?
Yeah, it's Paul Stevens, 39 Corey. I'll figure out one of these days how to change that. Anyway, Emily, I was the one that asked the question about the Valparaiso building. And
Mhm.
my concern is that section between the red light at Bridge Street and where Main Street goes, at least to Swan, and maybe even as far as to where Main Street goes back out onto 29. That section's 165. The addresses of those buildings are 165, and I'm concerned that the Valparaiso property is not in this new, I forget the proper terminology, but
The
included
mandatory
in the
set
ordinance
aside.
that was passed in December.
Yeah, we can, I mean, the intent was for it to follow, but 29,
understand.
165, turn at the light and then Main Street. I mean, that's kind of the intent of it, but we can look at the language and make sure that
I think
it's
you really need to look at
clear.
the language and have the lawyer look into it, because that is a choice site. And it is up, well, like I say, it was up for sale. I don't know if it's already gone to contract or closed or anything, but we could be missing a real opportunity there.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Are there other questions or comments? Just go ahead and raise your hand. And Sean, go ahead and unmute and ask your question or share your comment.
So I just want to share the question ask the question that I rudely interrupted with before. Sorry about that. I'm just curious about how, for this kind of abandoned property, eminent domain, policy, how are the abandoned houses identified, and does the city just already know about them, and is there a certain criteria that makes them abandoned?
Yeah, and there are criteria. They're in the state statute, and they're also referenced in ours. So there are very specific criteria that have to be followed or have to be present. And then the city creates a list. So it's a city process. So city staff city staff would do this, or city volunteers via the city staff. And then there's a noticing process. So if a property is put on the list, then you must notify the owner. The owner has X number of days. I no longer have all these timeframes in my head, but they're all there in the law. They can come back to it and say, like, no, you're wrong. This isn't abandoned. And if so, then we can say, oh, we agree with you. We'll take you off the list. And if not, we say, we don't agree with you. We're going to keep you on the list. And then as I said, once a property's on the list, the city can choose to take action using the tools made available to it, but is not obligated to.
Okay, thank you. So it's city staff that are identifying them. That answers.
Yeah, I mean, technically, in the way that it works in the law is there's a public officer for the purposes of the Abandoned Properties Rehabilitation Act identified. I believe what we did in our ordinance is that it's the city clerk. And so officially it's the city clerk that maintains the list. People can make recommendations to the city clerk. So if a resident saw a property that they thought met the statutory requirements, could say, hey, city, I want you to check this out. We think this might be abandoned, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Leah, if you could just unmute yourself and ask your question or share your comment, please.
Sure, thank you. I'm Leah. I just wanted to announce that the Lambertville Affordable Housing Coalition, which is brand new, we're having our first Zoom panel meeting on April 1st at 7 p.m. We're going to be discussing how community land trusts can help Lambertville meet its affordable housing needs on the scale that we really need. Community land trusts can be made with existing buildings, and they could be already integrated throughout the city, which is what I'm hearing a lot of people value. They can also allow tenants to create wealth through their share in the building's equity. And so if you'd like to learn more, please join us. You can sign up at tinyurl.com/LAHC Zoom, or you can look us up on Facebook, Lambertville Affordable Housing Coalition. And thank you all for your time. This has been really great.
Thank you, Leah. Are there other questions or comments? Anybody else want to share anything? Yes, Mr. Stevens, you may have the floor again.
Paul Stevens, 39 Corey. I had a question for Emily, because it seemed to be, we're talking more about trying to get these RDP housing units in, whereas for the last year or so, we've been more concerned with 5 units that were in a set aside. Or I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not using the right word, not a set aside.
The unmet need, yeah.
Unmet need, thank you.
Yeah,
Just
and that's,
confused.
yeah, that really goes back to, again, when the city amended its settlement agreement. Before it did that, the court order established certain timeframes to meet the condemnation and development of the Lambertville High School site. When it amended its settlement agreement and removed the condemnation aspect from that site, the court transferred required timelines to have the police site developed because the city already had control of that site. So while yes, the police site technically goes to the city's unmet need in our settlement agreement, that was really the cause and the reasoning behind focusing so much on that was those court required timeframes that we then had to meet.
But aren't we still kind of under pressure then to still find those 5 units somehow or not?
Yeah, and I think I've heard a couple of different discussion points tonight, expanding the accessory apartment program where it's available in town. That ordinance, there's other, a couple other mechanisms that, that I think the city could consider or think about, that we're working through, that, again, for the realistic unmet need, it's really creating opportunities for units to be created. So that was a kind of a specific situation just because the city had control of the site and the court and fair share required us to transfer those timeline obligations over to the site because the city had control. So that won't necessarily be the case for a future project that goes towards the unmet need.
Okay, Lisa?
Thanks. I haven't heard it raised yet, but I would really like to just put forth a question as to whether council will tackle. I'm concerned that Airbnbs are taking over a certain amount of housing that can be used for people to rent or buy. And it's a concern because we're already so limited. And, I'm just putting it out there. I don't know if that's going to be an unfettered growth area, but it's a concern.
So Emily, I'm gonna just feel this, Lisa and I talked about this yesterday. I spent some time a couple of weeks ago there have been a lot of conversations. I've had a lot of conversations in the last 2 months about Airbnb with interested residents. And I spent some time a couple of weeks ago on Airbnb and identified about 24 Airbnb sites in Lambertville of varying sizes. Most of them are studios and 1 bedrooms. There were several 2 bedrooms and 2 or 3 bedrooms. So it is something that Lisa and I talked about. I think it is it is something that we I believe as a council we might want to address. We need to follow up in terms of what if we could amend our city code in regards to limiting it. I'm not sure. This is a question that I need to find an answer to. I did also suggest that, while 24 units seems like a lot, when you have a housing stock of, 1,800, it's a relatively small percentage. I'm not saying that it's not a problem. And it's not something that we should keep an eye out for. But it's certainly a visual concern, I think, for people. And it's something that we should be having a conversation about at a minimum. And I don't know, Emily, if you have any thoughts on it.
Yeah, this is an issue that the city's been, talking about and thinking about since, I think 2015 or so, where when Airbnbs first really hit the market. And, we looked into creating an ordinance back then even to prohibit them or determine zones that they were permitted in. And at the time is when all of the major cities, San Francisco, New York, all the major cities were bringing suit against them and were losing in court. So, and the city even had its own suit against one unit and lost. And after that, we kind of backed away, and every court case we saw, the municipalities were losing. So I think we need to relook at it, in terms of the legality of being able to restrict the short-term rental uses. The city did add them to need to pay the hotel motel tax, which is a whole other issue because I think there's issues with the state actually releasing the tax funds. But in terms of actually prohibiting them, I think we need to look at legally if we can.
Thanks, Emily. I'm actually going to ask Evan Lyde. I inadvertently lowered his hand, but he was next in the queue. So, Evan, if you have a question or a comment, and I'll just make a note that it's 8:25. So, at a minimum, we're probably going to lose Emily, Julia, and Elaine in the next 5 minutes. But as I said, I'm happy to stay on for a little bit and either field questions or continue the conversation. So, why don't we move on to Evan if you still have something to say?
Great. Thank you so much, Andrew. Quick question. When we look at the locations where we currently have affordable housing, are there any locations where we can modify the zoning to allow additional affordable housing on those existing properties? For example, I'm thinking of Little Haven. I see Little Haven's for sale. Is there an opportunity there where we can somehow increase the amount of affordable housing or affordable housing credits that we're getting there?
Yeah, so right now the Little Haven, that one, it is for sale. I mean, it goes on and off the market constantly. But with that project, there's the main building that has, I think, 12 bedrooms in it, and then two smaller buildings that one is 4 and one is 5 bedrooms in it. That might not be the right bedroom mix because the total is 18. But I'm not really sure. It's a site we can look at. I don't think the main house it's basically the replica of City Hall. So I don't think we'd want to do anything where we say, let's demo everything and build something new on that site. But
I know in the backyard there might be some extra space, and it seems to me that we need to have two plans here. One is a short-term plan, but then we obviously need a long-term plan that's, we don't want to be continuing doing this every 15 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And the affordable housing rounds are technically supposed to be every 10 years. But again, so in 2025, we'll see what happens. I haven't heard any talk about how towns are supposed to determine what their obligations are for the 4th round yet. It's still in the court system. Usually it was the state that was mandated with creating those regulations. So we're kind of up in the air for the 4th round. So while it's technically supposed to start in 2025, it might be another 20 years before that one starts. And we're right back in the situation with these larger gap periods and having larger obligations than we would if it was moving forward in the 10-year increments.
But I think the point is, Emily, and to Evan's point, certainly the reason why we're doing this, this kind of conversation is different than the way the city has handled affordable housing in the past. And so the goal here is we understand we are under extreme pressure in the short term, and we're going to have to be really creative, really fast. But we also, all of this conversation we're having tonight is intended to set up that longer term planning so we can start working now and be prepared. If the state is going to screw around with the timelines, cool, we can't do anything about that, but we can get prepared and have a better sense of how we want to manage our land use and our social equity issues at the same time.
Yeah, I would just build on that answer. I think that you've got it exactly right, Council President. I think that we need to be thinking, in many different approaches, and really at this point to begin to to create a culture of possibility in terms of our affordable housing, and to really drive home all the different mechanisms that we can use. And I think, Evan, you asked a great question. Something came up in my mind today. I'm not going to go into detail about it, about one of these sites where I thought to myself, is it possible that we could expand on this particular site? And it's a question I was going to ask Emily, but the day wore on too quickly. So I think a lot of people are thinking about this, and I think we have to continue to have these conversations. I think it's imperative to the culture and to our values here in town, and also to satisfy the obligations. So let's just take one. If you can make your question quick, Andre. I don't want to keep Emily and Julia and Elaine past the time.
Yeah, just really quick. I remember Emily mentioned that rentals will get us there more quickly and meeting that need. I think the town is 53% currently rental units. Is that correct?
I don't have the demographics in front of me, so I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
I can get that number though.
All right. I'm just curious what percentage of the town is already rental. So that was it. Thank you.
Thanks. Let's give Dave Bird a moment here if we can. We're at 8:30, but go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a real simple question. Accessory apartments, to encourage those, is there any tax abatement associated for a property owner?
Yeah, there's not a tax abatement per se, but there's you get a $20,000 or $25,000 subsidy out of from the municipality to help offset those costs for that 10-year period. Once those deed restrictions are done at 10 years, then the owner can rent it out as a market rate unit. So it's you get a subsidy for the 10 years of having it deed restricted as affordable, and then it converts to a market rate unit.
Would the city have an opportunity to be creative and provide some tax relief, during the time that is, in that 10-year period?
That might be more of a legal question, but we can certainly ask one of the attorneys.
Just being creative.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. I'd like to thank everybody for coming this evening, and especially Emily, who is amazing even on 5 hours of sleep. And Council President Taylor and Elaine, thank you so much for being here tonight. Just a couple of reminders. We will post this. This is being recorded. We will post this meeting to the Affordable Housing web page of the city's site, as well as Emily's deck, PowerPoint presentation. I would encourage anybody who's interested or who has a question to write to me directly at mayornowick@lambertvillenj.org. I'm also available Wednesday afternoons from 3 to 6 in City Hall every single week, unless I'm sick or away. So that's an opportunity for people to come in and talk to me about not just this issue, but any issue. And so I think that's probably all I have to say. I'll stay on for a few minutes in case anybody has any questions or wants to continue the conversation. But again, I'd say thank you very much to Emily, Julia, and Elaine, and everybody for participating. This is where we start today, and hopefully we'll continue to build on what we've done in the past in meaningful ways. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for your time, everybody.
Thanks.
All right. Let's see. Emily, are you staying on for a minute?
I can stay on if there's more questions.
Let's see.
I'm still awake, so.
All right. So we have, let's see. Give it another minute. All right. So Paul and Renee and iPhone, if you just want to unmute, if there's anything in particular that you'd like to say, just go ahead and.
It's Paul here. Yeah, I was also the one that inquired about the CVS, and I was. Now, does CVS not own that property? Is there a landlord associated with it?
Yeah, CVS is a tenant there, so that killed our our prior discussions with them, where they have they had an existing 20-year lease with the ability to extend for another 20 years. They had a certain number of parking spaces required in their lease, you know, and it was just something that the property owners did not want to mess with their CVS tenant whatsoever. So they ultimately decided to terminate any future discussions with
It
us.
might not hurt to approach the landlord again and say, look, if things change, given CVS has announced plans for nationwide store closings, to give us a heads up.
Well, a couple things on that. You know, I think that the lease, if I remember correctly, if Mayor Fall told me the lease ends in 2027, and I think that there were conversations about possibly acquiring that lot, but it was an astronomical sum, right? I mean, Julia, do you remember this? Something like 7-9 million. I don't remember.
Yeah, it
but-
was, I mean, it's a very developable site, but I mean, I agree, Paul, we can let them know that we're interested in talking. And I would be surprised if last news report I saw said that CVS was gonna close 300 locations nationwide. So we have no idea if this one is gonna be it. But I can't imagine those owners, given the little bit I know about them, they wouldn't come to us right away if that was gonna be the case.
Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking though, that like, well, they got the CVS here and the CVS in New Hope. I mean, the corporation does. Which one's gonna, yeah, it seemed like an obvious choice if they decided to get rid of something. Anyway, okay, thanks. Appreciate that. That was, just didn't think that was for a group discussion.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Thanks,
Emily,
Paul.
I'm really concerned about 165 because a lot of people just assume that's still 29 there. And it could end up into a lawsuit or something like that.
Yeah, we can definitely take a look at that language and clean up that ordinance to make it more clear, where it even says the eastern boundary of the right of way for,
Well,
you know.
or the northbound northbound lane of 29 even, or something like that, you know?
Yeah,
Because I
yeah.
think the southbound might technically goes behind it then.
Well, yeah, if we say like the east, you know, the eastern right of way boundary for 129, and 165, you know.
Yeah.
But
let's get it clean. Yeah, sure we're
Yeah.
clean.
Yeah, we can look into that.
Okay. Hey, good night, everybody.
Hey, Paul, good to
Night.
have you
Thanks,
here.
Paul.
Thanks.
Thanks. Come on, leave. There we go.
Thanks, you guys. Let me hang on a second.